We're still in the early days of 2023, so Happy New Year, everyone. And thanks for the privilege of your time in 2022. I'm Linda Akibe, and you're welcome to the Gavel. The National Assembly will be resuming plenary on January 17th after the holidays. Now, before the break, both houses passed the 2023 budget, and President Buhari signed the budget last Tuesday, January 3rd. The president signed a 21.83 trillion naira budget. Today, we'll be doing a brief review of the National Assembly in 2022, looking at some major legislations passed and intervention by federal lawmakers.
In 2022, the National Assembly undertook one of its most important endeavors, the amendment of the 1999 Constitution. Previous assemblies have had a go at amending the Constitution with varying levels of success. The consensus by a cross-section of Nigerians is that the 1999 Constitution is flawed and does not meet the collective aspirations of Nigerians. In fact, it's been described by some as a non-Nigerian constitution. From the moment the Ninth Assembly announced it would amend the nation's constitution, the declaration was met with a debate in the public sphere on the efficacy of the National Assembly's piecemeal approach of amending the constitution and if this method is in the best interest of the nation. Undeterred by these viewpoints, the National Assembly began the process of amending the 1999 Constitution in January 27, 2020 and climaxed on March 1, 2022 when the Senate and House of Representatives voted on 68 constitution amendment bills. Some of these bills center on issues which have captured public interest over the years.
I think that process suffered. It was not properly chaperoned, by those responsible for it. It was also not properly, there was no dedication to it. I could put it that way. So I'm afraid that perhaps another huge sum of money gone down the drain.
But Parliament failed to amend all the constitutional gender bills before it, an action which infuriated gender rights activists, triggering days of protest at the National Assembly. The gender bills include Bill to expand the scope of citizenship by registration, Bill expanding indigenship rights, Bill to create special seats for women in national and state houses of assembly, Bill to ensure early submission of names of nominees for ministers and commissioners, 35% affirmative action for women in political party administration. Unfortunately, it appears that the 9th National Assembly's attempt to amend the 1999 Constitution may be an exercise in futility, as Parliament has accused state assemblies of stalling the process.
We received a letter from the Conference of Speakers of State Assemblies informing the National Assembly that the remaining states will not act. The remaining states will not act on the 44 bills unless the National Assembly passes 4 new bills they have proposed in the letter.
I think the National Assembly is waiting for the state assemblies to send in their inputs so they can move. But I don't think the Constitution can be amended under this government. The way it is going, it is too late.
The House of Representatives considered 221 bills in 2022. Some of the critical bills passed by the House of Representatives in 2022 include Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2022, Finance Bill 2022, Money Laundering Prohibition Act Repeal and Enactment Bill 2022, Witness Protection and Management Bill 2022, Business Facilitation Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2022. 142 bills were introduced in the Senate in 2022. National Social Security Commission Establishment Bill 2022, Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2022, Terrorism Prevention Bill, National Health Emergency Bill, Nigeria Startup Bill 2022. In addition to the passage of some critical legislations, the Senate and House of Representatives considered several bills to establish federal government-funded institutions, a practice which a legislative analyst faults.
In an era where we are talking of reducing the cost of governance, and what you see are bills to establish one institution of higher learning in their community, in their backyard, bills to, so again, this is where the issue of value, how much contribution does such bills or proposals make to the governance process?
Mr. Epia also questions the avalanche of bills introduced by some federal lawmakers in 2022 without corresponding actions to ensure they are passed.
Most of these bills are stuck on first reading, but none of them goes to the more critical charts of, the productivity of the bills, the progression of the bills.
Beyond the passage of legislations, the National Assembly intervened in some issues of national importance. The leadership of the House of Representatives intervened in the strike by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and made good its promise by including 170 billion naira for salary renegotiation and 300 billion naira for revitalization of Nigerian universities in the 2023 budget.
The recent CBN policy, which the National Assembly rose, both chambers rose against it, and I think you can see CBN backpedaling and increasing the limit.
The Senate and House of Representatives also met with the CBN over its cash withdrawal policy. In addition, the Senate leadership met with service chiefs to review the strategies of fighting insecurity and explore more solutions to the problem. The meeting with the service chiefs was in response to threats by some federal lawmakers in the Senate to impeach President Buhari over his failure to resolve the security crisis in the country.
I believe that our security agencies and armed forces have been doing their best, but apparently we have to do more to achieve what we desire to achieve. There are, of course, several arguments whether the resources available to our armed forces and other security agencies are enough or not. Definitely not enough. I don't know of any country where there's enough, really. But even within the scarcity that we have, this administration and this Senate and National Assembly has always prioritized the security of our country.
Quite a lot has happened, quite a lot has been done, quite a lot is being done to ensure that we improve on the security setting across the country. The commitment is there, is very profound. I believe that as we go into the discussions on specifics, it will be clear that no one is leaving any stone unturned in redressing all the imbalances within the security environment.
The 9th National Assembly will terminate in 2023, but both houses still have a few months to go, and keen observers want Parliament to give attention to some issues.
It would be great if the National Assembly is able to get a hang on our debt crisis, to be able to sit up and address the issues of revenue and borrowing and try to fix the economy.
In anticipation of the 10th National Assembly with a high turnover of lawmakers, Nigerians will want to see a crop of parliamentarians who would prioritize the national interest and be more proficient in finding solutions to the challenging economic problems of the country. They would also want Parliament to properly scrutinize loan requests from President Buhari to ensure the country is not plunged deeper into debt. The matters of revenue generation and fiscal discipline are also issues which analysts say the National Assembly must pay greater attention to, particularly through its oversight of government agencies.
A civil society organization focused on the federal legislature called the Order Paper recently released an annual report on its independent performance appraisals of the 9th Assembly. Now, this is the third session of this performance appraisal and is intended to examine the efficiency of federal legislators using sponsoring and processing of bills and motions by legislators as an evaluation matrix. We had a chat with the CEO of the Order Paper, Mr. Oke Epia, to get more details about the report.
We think that it's very important at this point in time for citizens to be able to have data to determine whether or not those that they have sent in 2019 up until now and the elections, have been able to deliver the goods in terms of, the expectations of members of parliament, their core duties and functions. So we use that data to organize what we call their performance appraisers, and put it into this format. So for the first time, we're having this format, put it into this format, a report, an organized report that is just handy, and it's available on our website, otherpaper.ng, and all of that. So unlike the previous appraisers that we put out, that is, scattered here and there, in bits and pieces, we thought that since we got support, from USAID under the SCALE project, we should organize this and make this, a one-stop shop tool for citizens to be able to see what their lawmakers have done since 2019 and be able to determine, first of all, whether those who want to come back, who got the tickets to come back, the nominations of their party to come back, truly deserve to come back by virtue of what they have done or they haven't done or they have not even done rightly. Or those who have maybe freshmen coming in, so they also are benchmarked by what these sets of lawmakers, the 2019, 2023 sets have done. So they have a benchmark to be able to lay certain expectations ahead of them when they come. So that's about the timeliness. It's necessary and it is timely.
What method was employed while doing the research for this report?
What we have used to conduct this research is the data obtained from the records of the National Assembly. Now, because data do not lie, data, they are very stubborn things. They speak to just the way it is. And so using that data to organize into the core functions of the legislator and the legislature, which is lawmaking, the performance of oversight, and of course, representation. So for this particular annual report that we have put out, the focus is largely on lawmaking, which is why it is around the Bs. But we have also learned from, earlier editions of the appraisals that we did. And so this time around, we had moved on to a more organized sets of metrics, so what we call the VVIP, indices, for reaching, organizing the data sets. So the Bs are distilled into proportions around the volume of sponsorship, the value of the Bs, the impact of the Bs, and then the progression of the Bs. Because what we saw after the release of our midterm report was a rush. I use that word advisedly. A rush by members of the National Assembly to get on the score sheet of B's sponsorship. So we had situations where members who never sponsored B's for 2 years of the National Assembly, made a push, and suddenly they had their names to B's. Sometimes, as much as 10 B's, 20 B's in less than a year, what they did not do in 2 years. So if for some, and maybe for them, those particular lawmakers, it may seem like, okay, they may have met the expectations. But we think that, no, that is only one side of it. The volume of the B's that you have your name on is not really the true story. The true story is how well have those B's progressed, along, the mail of legislative processing. Like you very well know, there are at least 6 stages for a bill to become law, and that's, the regular bill, it's 7. When it's a constitutional amendment bill. So if you just have your name on the bill, a gazetted piece of proposed legislation, and that's enough for you to say to your constituents that, oh, you've sponsored 28 bills, you've sponsored 30 bills. We say to you, that's notable, but that's not enough. Have those bills gone through public hearing? Have they come back from committee? Have they been passed? Have they gone for concurrence, by the other chamber? Have they gone for president? So all of these stages, we put them together and, have what we call a very important metrics of measurement.
We continue with the interview with the Chief Executive Officer of the Other Paper, Mr. Oke Epia. Do you think that analyzing the performance of lawmakers in terms of bills, in terms of legislations sponsored and passed, is an effective way of, evaluating the performance of lawmakers in general? Because we know there are other indices such as constituency outreach representation and also oversight.
No, using the number of bases is not. But using the metrics of, the value, the impact, and the progression, and begin from the foundation of number. That's why I said VVIP. That VVIP cluster is an effective way of measuring performance with respect to lawmaking. I had made that point because what you're saying is very valid. What about the other two core functions of the legislature and legislators, and some lawmakers pretty much like you have said, score, we can observe them. They score, pretty good marks in those areas. But the core function of legislature or a legislator is lawmaking. And so if you are doing very well in the other areas, and you are not doing too well, or you are completely absent in this area, that we need to have that conversation if you really are delivering the goods for your constituents, right? Your constituents expect you to go and advance their cause. Sometimes you advance the national cause as well because you are in the National Assembly. So if you don't do that, questions need to be also raised, So I agree with you. What we may say is that using lawmaking as a basis for assessing performance may not be sufficient. We could say that, But, it's an evolutionary process. We didn't have this. I think that when we unveiled this report on Wednesday at the National Assembly, and that was deliberate, because we wanted to say, hey, look, we did this, and we are bringing it to you, to your home, to your doorstep. Own it, see what you have done. You be bold and say, okay, look, criticize it if you will. And we did have some criticisms, like some of these points you are making. So it was deliberate that we had to unveil it at the National Assembly itself, so that, like one of the members who came said, nothing to hide. This is transparent. We are accountable. We want to be held accountable both by the lawmakers and by citizens that we report to. So it is the way of getting, that feedback, getting that interaction, that interface ongoing. That is what we are stimulating.
There is also this, question of quantity versus quality of legislations passed versus the quality of these bills being sponsored by lawmakers.
A good percentage, up to about 1/3 of the bills sponsored in the Senate in the period under review, the first 3 years, are establishment bills. In the House of Representatives, the picture is not any different, if not worse. One of the gentlemen in the House of Representatives who's got the highest number of bills from Kaduna State, most of those bills are establishment bills. So you see, it's got volume, but what is the value of those bills? Those individuals got volume, but what are the values of those bills? You look at the bills that we have, been able to analyze in this period. For anti-corruption, of the over 700 bills in the Senate, it's only about 1.4 of them that speak to anti-corruption. Okay, and to be honest, there's nothing really wrong with this. But again, it shows to you that there may have been a mismatch between the core objectives, the drive, the promised deliverables of this government, and what Parliament is doing. And this is also one of the reasons why we are not having, a faster, development, faster governance processes, and, service delivery, generally speaking, So these are key indices for Nigerians to be able to set an agenda for the next administration. What is your mandate? How are you able to get Parliament, the legislature, to key into your mandate? It's one key question that we must keep making as we get deeper into the election season. If there is not that appropriate match, or there is a mismatch, or there continues to be a mismatch, there is no legislative agenda that syncs with the executive agenda, development would continue to stall. Service delivery by government will continue to be a mirage. And so citizens need to begin to think deeply around this when they are electing members of the National Assembly in 2023. That is one area we're deeply also focused in at this moment, which is why I spoke to timeliness of this report.
Now, we have, some governors from former governors in the 9th Assembly. And predictions are showing that we might still have more of former governors coming into the 10th Assembly, as some of them have indicated interest in coming to the Senate in 2023. Now, assessing the performance of these governors, the governors in the 9th Assembly, whether in the Senate or House of Representatives, what have they brought to the table?
What we have seen from the midterm until now, it tends to validate the perception citizens have that governors complete 2 terms in office and their next port of call is the Senate, all like in a bid to just remain in government. So it's a lose-lose for everyone, party involved, when we have this set of individuals coming to the National Assembly and all they do is to sleep and slumber, most of them. So what we have seen is that a good number of them, have Bs to their names in this report, but what kind of Bs? Bs that are first reading, 80% or more of them are on first reading stages, at least 80% of them. So these are an index, a category we call, stagnated Bs. We actually call them Bs dumping category.
Now, evaluating the performance of female legislators in the Senate and House of Representatives, the ability, because we know politics is a numbers game and it also applies in the National Assembly, the ability to build consensus with that number to see to the passage of critical gender bills. Do you think this had a role to play in why majority of the gender bills were not passed in the 9th Assembly because of the number of the female legislators?
I would not think so, because I think that issues around gender and inclusion, are not a burden for female legislators alone. So I think it has to do more with the individual disposition of lawmakers, whether male or female. So let me give you this example. The top 10 performers in the Senate, in terms of base progression, which is the category to actually look out for, where you have the champions. You have a female there. And she's not just on that score chart, but she's got, an edge, just an edge over like 7 or so of them on that score chart. Why? Because she's got a bill that has been assented to by the president. And that's what I'm saying.
Which lawmaker is that?
That's Senator Aisha from Adamawa State, is it? Benani, So you see someone who's probably came into the National Assembly, into the Senate with an agenda, with a clear-cut agenda of what she wanted to achieve, and she kept pushing, and she got what she wanted. Compare that to the other names I mentioned, 38 Bs, 39 Bs, 29 Bs, first reading, most of them. So the difference is clear. What is it that Benani is doing that Odwa cannot do, or is not able to do, or that Ekunife is not able to do? But like I said, all of this is to lay it bare for citizens, for their constituents, for Nigerians to see, raise questions, demand answers, and that puts pressure on them to sit up. So if both of these ladies are able to come back, for instance, from Anambra State in the 10th Assembly, they already have an agenda set for them.
Now, this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.